Raven's Hollow was a town shrouded in mystery, with a history of whispered rumors and half-told tales. It was the kind of place where people kept to themselves, and secrets were buried deep. On a cold, foggy evening, a group of 5 friends, Elena, Marcus, Sophie, Jake, and Olivia, decided to explore the old part of town. They were young, curious, and always looking for a thrill, so when they stumbled upon a dilapidated antique shop tucked away in a forgotten alley, they couldn't resist going inside. The shop was filled with oddities from a bygone era: dusty books, tarnished silverware, and faded portraits that seemed to follow them with their eyes. But what caught their attention was a box on a dusty shelf, hidden under a layer of cobwebs. The box was ornate, carved with strange symbols, and seemed out of place in the cluttered shop. Its label read, "Psychological Games." Intrigued, Marcus pulled the box down and opened it. Inside was a beautifully crafted board with pieces that looked like they were made of bone. The game's rules were simple. Each player had to answer questions or complete tasks, all designed to reveal their innermost thoughts and fears. The instructions warned that the game was not for the faint-hearted, but they laughed it off. It was just a game, after all. Back at Elena's house, they set up the game in the living room. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and teasing, as they prepared for what they thought would be a night of fun. The first few rounds were harmless, asking them to share embarrassing stories or confess silly fears. But as the game progressed, the questions became darker, more invasive, probing into their pasts and unearthing secrets they had long buried. "Tell us about your greatest regret," the game demanded of Sophie. She hesitated, her eyes clouding with memories she didn't want to revisit. But the game didn't wait. The board began to glow ominously, and Sophie felt a cold pressure on her chest. She gasped, her voice trembling as she confessed, I let my sister die. I could have saved her, but I was too scared." The room fell silent. They had all known Sophie's sister had died in a tragic accident, but no one had known the truth. The guilt had eaten away at Sophie for years, and now laid bare by the game. It felt like a wound that had been ripped open. But there was no time to console her. The game was relentless, moving on to the next player. "Reveal your darkest fear," it demanded of Jake. He tried to brush it off, but the board pulsed, growing hotter in his hands until he could no longer hold back. "I'm afraid of losing control, of becoming a monster," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. As the game continued, it became clear that it wasn't just a game. It was something far more sinister, something that fed off their fears and secrets, growing stronger with each confession. The questions became increasingly cruel, forcing them to confront the parts of themselves they had tried to hide, even from each other. Olivia was next. "What do you desire the most?" the game asked. She looked around at her friends, her face pale. She hesitated, then answered, "Power. I want power over others, to make them fear me." The admission sent a chill through the group. Olivia had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict. But now, they saw a different side of her, a side that was cold, calculating, and dangerous. The game was changing them, revealing not just their fears, but also the darkness within. Elena was the last to go. "What are you willing to do to survive?" the game asked her. The room seemed to close in around her as she struggled to breathe. "Anything," she finally whispered. "I would do anything to survive." The room grew colder, the shadows deepening as the game continued its grip on their minds. It wasn't just a test of their secrets, it was a test of their sanity. Each round pushed them further into madness, blurring the lines between reality and the nightmare the game was creating. They tried to stop, to end the game, but the board refused to let them. It had them trapped, its power feeding off their fear and desperation. The game pieces moved on their own, the questions growing more twisted, more personal. The friends turned on each other, their bonds unraveling as paranoia set in. Every whispered word, every sideways glance became a threat as the game played with their minds. In the dead of night, the final question came. The board glowed with an eerie light, its voice echoing in their minds. "Who among you deserves to live?" Panic set in. They knew the game had led them to this moment, pitting them against each other in a final, deadly choice. Marcus, who had been the one to find the game, tried to reason with them, but his voice was drowned out by the overwhelming fear that had taken hold. Sophie, driven mad by guilt, lunged at Olivia, her eyes wild. "You want power? Take it," she screamed, as the room erupted into chaos. They fought, not just against each other, but against the darkness the game had brought out in them. In the end, only one would survive. But survival came at a cost. The game had taken their humanity, their sanity, and left them as mere shells of who they once were. The survivor, broken and alone, watched as the game reset itself, ready for its next victims. The next morning, the antique shop was gone, leaving no trace of its existence. But somewhere, in another quiet town, another group of unsuspecting souls would find the game, and the cycle of terror would begin anew.